Hi, it's Ian from the Postal Hub podcast.
And Marek from Last Mile Experts.
And we are the Last Mile Prophets. This is the last word on the last mile. Marek, some recent research has come out about one of your favourite topics, and that is carbon emissions and out-of-home delivery. I shared this report with you just an hour ago, and already I feel like you've memorised it because you've been throwing statistics at me before we hit record. But the effect of pickup points, let's call them PUDOs, and returns on CO2 emissions in parcel deliveries. Now, there's a really eye-catching statistic in there, isn't there, Mark?
Indeed, Ian. Probably the most interesting one is the fact that when you use out of home, there's about 1/3 less carbon footprint created. And Ian, what we've got to remember, this is out of home, which is PUDOs and lockers. With lockers, I would imagine that it's actually even better.
So this is compared to a residential delivery. So a saving, also 33% less CO2 emissions for the last mile for parcels delivered via pickup points compared to delivering those parcels to home addresses. Now, that is a big figure. And I know there's a guy I know, his name's Marek or something, who says, and if you make those deliveries done by electric vehicles, there's even more savings, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. But let's focus on just this news, which is pretty big. 1/3 is an awful lot of carbon. But if you imagine that that's based on PUDOs, which will typically have maybe 10, maybe 20 parcels per point, an effective locker network will have double that. So I would imagine, and this is a very rough guesstimate, that we're probably talking about half, maybe even less than half. Now that's compelling. We talk about all these steps, electric vehicles, etc., they're all very sexy, but none of that will achieve quite the same level, in my opinion. Because bear in mind, countries like Poland, how do you make the electricity?
Well, there's a whole load of discussions around the sources of electricity and then the tailpipe emissions versus emissions somewhere else, of course. The other question around electric vehicles, and this is not a criticism of electric vehicle people, don't fill my inbox with hate mail about this, is the total cost of ownership versus of an electric vehicle versus an internal combustion engine vehicle. What shall we say? I don't want to say the science isn't in yet, but it's not as clear cut as it might be. However, I'll share in the comments below some research from Swisspost recently on their experiences with electric vehicles. And it's quite interesting where they've found savings thanks to electric vehicles and other places where it hasn't been quite as much a money saver as they would have liked. Anyway.
But you know what, Ian? Do you remember we also spoke to our friends at Norway Post, and there were under the scenes or behind the scenes savings, electric vehicles, where they found that because they're small, very agile, people could get in and out faster, that operationally it was saving money.
That's a great point, yeah.
So I would say, first of all, electric vehicles can be more attractive than you might think, looking just at the total cost of ownership. The second thing we've got to remember, in many markets you have subsidies.
Yep.
So let's not knock EVs, but today we're talking about...
Yeah, now this is a little bit of I've gone down a little bit of a tangent here with my electric vehicle discussion, but why I mentioned this, Marek, is that the cost of acquiring electric vehicles versus the cost of setting up a PUDO network, what are your thoughts there?
PUDO is very, very, very cheap, provided software and know-how.
Key point there, software and know-how, because there's the software is one thing, but then being able to actually handle the parcels in the outlet is key. Storage, understanding the systems, clear customer flows, and understanding how to serve the customers, and good, wait for it, Marek, I'm going to steal your thunder here, good IDM.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Kerr. That had to come up, didn't it?
But smooth as a cashmere codpiece, Marek, what can I say?
It's even deeper than that, Ian, because it's not just managing the points, which is important, but it's managing the network itself. What do you do when you're finding new points? How do you, sorry, this is very American, induct them? How do you induct those new points? Not suggesting there's anything wrong with American speak. So how do you induct them? How do you select them? How do you make sure they're working okay? So it's actually very, very complex. We're running 2 network startup projects at the moment for clients, and it is really very, very complicated, even though it's low cost. So, it's relatively cheap to do, but very difficult to do unless you've got the technology and know-how.
You have to plan well. You can't just go out and get as many PUDO points. When I say you, I mean a delivery company, or even if you're an e-commerce company trying to compete head-to-head with Amazon and you want to set up your equivalent of Amazon Hub counter. But you have to select the partners properly as well. You've talked about sites and things like that. But people are a key part of this. So I know we're getting off the topic of the carbon savings here, Mark, but gee, it's so unlike us to go off on tangents. But given the compelling emissions argument for PUDOs, if you want to go down the PUDO path, you have to get the people side of it right as well. And I know people at Australia Post are going to say, well, of course you're going to say that, Ian, you have to get the payment right too.
Absolutely. And I think, Ian, this is one of the advantages of lockers. A lot of the people part is eliminated. Not suggesting people are bad, but it means it's a lot easier. It's
different. A delivery person loading parcels into a locker is, I don't want to say simpler, but it's different to a delivery person handing over 5 parcels, 10 parcels, 30 parcels to a PUDO operator and all of the processes around that, and then the storage and all of that. So it isn't the same thing, but it can be simpler.
It is. I'd argue it is simpler, and I'll tell you why. The machine always behaves in the same way. So you go to the machine, a person won't, but the machine will always do the same thing. You go there, if you've got contactless systems that allow you to press a button, cell 1 opens, pop in the parcel, cell 2, cell 3, cell 4. I've actually seen it where it's literally like that, bang, 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 bang.
It has to have the right data behind it, and this is a key thing. I'm wagging my finger now, Mark. Look at me, I'm wagging my finger. The key thing here is knowing what parcel fit into what cell, all right?
And that's all about, what's that all about? Software.
Software, right.
If you've got the right software, and of course, minimum supporting hardware, it's all going to work. And this is the mistake that's made, frankly, both with PUDOs and lockers. We have really got off a tangent. We should maybe do this about how to... Do you remember we have the Last Mile Profit workshop on setting up PUDO and locker networks? But really, this is a whole big topic. And maybe
we have just sort of skimmed the surface on this one. If you want us to run a workshop for your organisation about setting up a PUDO network, email us, contact us via the website, whatever, and we'll look at setting something up, because we can go in depth and really peel back the layers on this onion, can't we, Mark? But this is an interesting addition to all of that is we always knew intuitively that there'd be less emissions, especially when there's the right PUDO network density, which comes back to what you said before about selecting the right sites, yeah?
Absolutely. And I think that let's talk through the classic arguments against. One of the classic arguments is people have to specially go...
Make an extra trip.
Yeah. But then we've got this wonderful new word that I learned from you, trip chaining.
Yes.
So often people will do it on their way somewhere. And in my particular case, my closest, and this is the density issue, my closest PUDO is around about 350 meters away. My closest locker is about 400 meters away. So guess what? I walk. And genuinely, and of course this is maybe a bit subjective, and perhaps there are other people, but I either walk or I really do it on my way because it's easiest if I have a bigger parcel. So I don't buy this argument that where you have a good network, a dense network, that people will specially go to the PUDO or locker.
Comment below, everybody. What are your observations? What are your opinions on this? And we'll see. We might even share a link to this research that shows these savings in emissions in PUDO delivery, because it's interesting stuff. Marek, any final comments before we wrap it up?
Final thing, I think, is that this is just part of the picture, because carbon actually also relates to other types of pollution, noise pollution, congestion, and so on.
Point.
So, from that perspective, let's watch this space. I can imagine more and more smart cities saying, hold on, we've got to change the way things work.
Yeah.
The Salzburg example within Post, where they're actually, Salzburg is on their own initiative, putting in lockers. So let's watch this
And that's
space.
not the only city that's doing that, and I'll be covering this topic on the Postal Hub podcast in a few weeks' time, so stay tuned for that one. We've run out of time, Marek, so we've got to wrap it up now. Marek Ruzhetsky, thanks for being part of the Last Mile Profits today.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everyone.